Hi, in this video, we will learn all about accounting for calls in advance. First, let's understand the meaning of calls in advance. A company may, if its articles of association allows, accept the amount against the call or calls which is not yet made. When the company accepts money from the allottees against the calls which is not yet made, such amount is called calls in advance. This may also happen in case of partial or pro rata allotment of shares, where the company retains excess amount received on application of shares. Let's understand accounting for calls in advance with the help of an example. In our example, A Limited makes the first call of rupees 2 per share on 10,000 shares due. Amount of first call was duly received. In addition, a shareholder, Mr. Sohan, paid the second and final call money of rupees 3 on his 500 shares along with the first call. So Mr. Sohan has paid the final call money of rupees 3 per share on his 500 shares along with the first call itself. 3 months later, the company makes the final call of rupees 3 per share due, and all the amount is duly received. So let's see how we will pass journal entries for this example. We'll make the first call money due on 10,000 shares at rupees 2 per share, for which the journal entry is share first call account debit to share capital account, amount 10,000 shares multiplied by 2 rupees per share, 20,000 rupees. Next entry, A Limited receives rupees 21,500, 20,000 pertaining to the first call and 1,500 pertaining to the second call along with the first call, which will be accounted for as calls in advance account. So the journal entry would be bank account debit 21,500 rupees, indicating the receipt of 21,500 rupees by A Limited. To share first call account 20,000 rupees, the amount which is pertaining to the first call, and two calls in advance account 500 shares multiplied by 3 rupees per share, rupees 1,500. So this is the journal entry for the first call money received along with the second call money of rupees 3 per share on the 500 shares. Now the next entry 3 months later would be to make the second and final call money due. The journal entry share second and final call account debit to share capital account. The amount due is on 10,000 shares at rupees 3 per share, rupees 30,000. Now, the next entry, when the amount of the second and final call is received, we will receive only 28,500 rupees because 1,500 rupees Mr. Sohan has paid along with the first call. So we will debit bank account with 28,500 rupees. We need to transfer the calls in advance account of 1,500 to the second and final call. So we will debit calls in advance account debit 1,500 rupees to share second and final call account 30,000 rupees. This is for receipt of the final call money on the 9,500 shares and the calls in advance transferred to share second and final call account. So these are the journal entries relating to calls in advance. Let's go on to interest on calls in advance. Now, in case of calls in advance, the company pays interest at the rate which is specified in the Articles of Association of the company. In the absence of interest clause in the Articles of Association, Table A applies and the company is liable to pay interest at 12% per annum. You may recall that as per Table A, interest on calls and arrears can be charged by the company at 10% per annum. However, interest on calls in advance as per Table A is 12% per annum. This interest is an expense and it's debited to the statement of profit and loss. It is a charge against the profits and has to be paid whether there is a profit or not. Accounting for interest on calls in advance is not there in the syllabus. How do we disclose calls in advance in the balance sheet of the company? Now, this amount of calls in advance received, it's not yet due and therefore it's a liability of the company. It is shown in the equity and liability part of balance sheet under the head current liabilities and subhead other current liabilities as calls in advance. So in this video, we've learnt all about accounting for calls in advance. In the upcoming video, we will solve example sums in accounting for calls in advance.